FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And a pretty busy week, but one issue really rises to the top as far as agricultural policy is concerned and the broader ramifications that it might have going forward. That is, speaking of course of GMO labeling. And Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack was on Capitol Hill Thursday before the House Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, speaking about kind of a wide range of issues. And that was really the first time he'd ever divulged specifics about some meetings that happened at USDA between different sides of the food industry in regards to GMO labeling. Some stuff had leaked out through the industry representatives that were in the room. This is really the first time he's gone on record speaking about those meetings. And Phil, you were in the room for that hearing. What did we learn from Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack about what happened in those meetings?
Well, I think we got one sort of clue into what the discussions were. It was no surprise that it broke down because they couldn't agree on whether there would be labeling. There were two meetings, fairly extensive. We've been told that the Secretary was quite involved in both meetings. They finally broke up when they couldn't get an agreement. There were representatives from the conventional food industry and from organics and the proponents of GMO labeling. What Vilsack told us yesterday is that ultimately it broke down over the issue of whether you have to have something that says GMO on the label or whether you could use this smartphone-based disclosure system that the industry has developed called Smart Label. And if you could somehow, he didn't say how, whether that would be through surveys or whatever, determine whether whether this would meet consumers' needs. That's kind of the issue the objection that's been raised, that, well, a lot of people don't have smartphones or they can't use the internet, or what if they go into a store and they can't figure this information out. They really want to know about whether the genetically engineered ingredients. And so anyway, this is he gave that clue as to where, I mean, that suggests that that's what the industry is trying to sell Congress on, is that you can rely on the Smart Label system and possibly just make sure that it's going to meet consumer demand.
Now, a big reason that Secretary Vilsack had these meetings was because over in the Senate, they're trying to come up with some kind of a solution for a GMO labeling preemption bill, if that's what the bill would end up being. If you'll remember, last summer, the House passed a bill that would preempt state GMO labeling laws and create a national standard. But there was no companion legislation in the Senate quite yet, so he was hoping to feed some information to some key senators on the issue about where the industry stands on this situation. Couldn't really come to that consensus, but now we're learning that the Senate may go ahead with a bill, and the Senate, and particularly Senate Ag Committee Chairman Pat Roberts, may go ahead with the GMO labeling bill anyways.
Right. Well, there's this wall that the industry is looking at in July when the law in Vermont requiring biotech labeling takes effect. Chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, Pat Roberts, is feeling pressure from the industry. Another interesting source of pressure that we're starting to hear about are the sugar beet growers. And these are primarily up in the northern plains and in Michigan. They are concerned because we're beginning to see in stores packages of cane sugar that say no beet sugar. Most of the sugar beets that are grown in this country are Roundup ready. Cane sugar is not genetically engineered. And so there is a growing concern that, what would happen to the market for beet sugar? Now, this is important because if you start looking at the states where sugar beets are grown, it happens to be states like North Dakota, Minnesota, Michigan. There's 6 senators between those states. 5 of them are Democrats. Senator Roberts is trying to get It doesn't have much Democratic support for a preemption bill right now. He's trying to get uncommitted as many as, say, 15 Democrats in the Senate off the fence in support of this bill. One of those senators from Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, happens to be the top Democrat on the Agriculture Committee. She told us yesterday that they do need to come up with a compromise, and she is going to be working with Senator Roberts on that.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, what Senator Stabenow had to say, it's not like folks don't want to work on this bill. I think this is a solution, a piece of legislation of some kind has a very good chance of coming out of this. It's just a matter of what it's going to end up being, because there's been a lot of impasse, specifically over whether or not that labeling disclosure should be voluntary or mandatory.
Well, politically, it's a very tricky issue. We know there are a lot of consumers, a significant number of consumers anyway, who care a lot about this issue and GMOs. They're very concerned about what's in their food, and this concern crosses party lines. So it's not exactly an issue that a lot of probably some Republicans would like to deal with. But particularly tricky for a number of Democrats. So we're going to be watching this very closely in the coming weeks.
Also, just want to briefly mention here, days really, because that who knows when that Senate bill might come out. It could have come out as we're sitting here speaking right now, for all we know. But also, just want to briefly mention a few other things that happened this week, agriculturally speaking. Gina McCarthy was before the House Agriculture Committee, testifying about a wide range of EPA-related issues. Not going to dive into that too much in this video. We have an article up on our website. I encourage you to check that out if you're looking for kind of a breakdown of the issues that she faced. But Phil, I want to briefly talk to you about some action taken just a few minutes ago, pretty recently here in the House of Representatives on a menu labeling bill. It was a fairly party line split. There were about 20, 25, maybe 30 Democratic crossovers. But what can you tell us just briefly here about that menu labeling bill and what it's going to mean to the ag industry?
Well, there was a requirement that former Senator Harkin put in the Affordable Care Act that required restaurants, primarily restaurants, to start putting calorie counts on their menus and their menu boards. And that those regulations are set to take effect later this year. There's a number of concerns within the supermarket industry, among pizza chains, convenience stores, because they're all subject to this as well. Supermarkets within their, and a lot of supermarkets have delis, and it applies to them. So retailers are also concerned about the legal repercussions if their calorie counts are off. And so they have persuaded the House to pass a bill that would alter some of the FDA's, go in and change some of the FDA's rules on this and provide some legal protection to retailers. It passed with the support of 33 Democrats. There's a similar bill in the Senate. Nothing has happened over there, and it's obviously more difficult to move bills like this in the Senate. This is an issue that also could wind up riding along on an appropriations bill. With these rules set to take effect yet this year, something will have to happen in the Senate, or else the supermarkets and the pizza chains, the Domino's, are going to have to comply with the rules as they are.
Right, there's been conversations going on about menu labeling for a little while now. This is really the first time we've seen a vote on a bill like this happen, so I wanted to make sure that we brought that to your attention.
It's all about addressing obesity and trying to get people to consume fewer calories. And a lot of the major chains have already starting to put these on the board. You're seeing them, and in some cases it seems like they're also cutting their portion sizes as well, because you see those numbers look pretty big with large portions.
It's one thing to enjoy a good cheeseburger. It's another thing to realize that you're looking at about 1,000 or 1,500 calories sometimes. So that kind of was serving as a bit of a root.
Well, that's the whole point of the regulation.
And it's certainly an interesting week on Capitol Hill. A lot busier than I think a lot of folks were expecting,
Right.
and really a lot of things happened agriculturally speaking. I do want to mention that next week Congress is going to be taking the week off, and so will we. We will not be bringing to you a Week in Review video next week, but week after we will be looking to see what's happened as far as that, especially with that GMO labeling debate, because I'd be willing to bet that there's probably going to be some progress on that in the next 2 weeks.
And we're watching it.
Yeah, we will certainly be watching that, and if we don't bring it to you in video format, there will certainly be articles posted on that as the weeks progress here. That's going to do it for this week. For Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.